I'm hoping all of the delegates online now can hear us. So
Right. Hope everyone can hear us. Yep. Hi everyone. My name is Obi. I work as Senior Business Development Manager for a Check Certification Scheme. And as you probably already know, the core of what we do is that we test age and ID verification systems to make sure that they work. So we've done a lot of testing on different systems, and particularly one of the things that we come across while doing this testing are products that use artificial intelligence as a means of going through the verification process. I know that I'm here with Kim Loosely.
Hi.
How you doing?
I just got called out.
And the reason for that is we are particularly focusing this discussion on the 42001, which I'm aware that you authored.
I did participate quite heavily.
Yes, and really, so it's more of a question and answer on it. And why that's the case is because as a certification scheme, we don't know if this standard applies to age assurance technologies. And so the discussion really is about navigating through that and seeing if it applies so that we can then provide that service itself. And that's really how we want the discussion to go. So your contributions will be very much appreciated. Yeah. So the first question really is that in the context of age assurance services, how do you perceive the relevance and impact of AI management systems itself?
So are you assuming that the age assurance systems would have components of AI
Yes.
in them themselves? Okay.
Yes.
So I think the thing that you have to remember with management systems, and this is any management system, not just 42001, is that the main, one of the main kind of concepts is that an organization has to determine what the scope of their management system is, and they have to determine what the context of their organization is, the context that they're operating in, the stakeholders that they have, the regulations that they have to comply with. And so kind of, even if you look at the standard, the very first clause that has the, very first requirements in it is all about thinking about what your context is and establishing your scope.
Good.
And so, with those two things, I think that absolutely age verification systems that have AI components in them, yes, absolutely applicable.
Yeah.
It's all dependent on how the organization is scoping their management system.
Yeah.
And, there are various, the way that the standard is structured is that there are, a number of clauses that are the same types of clauses that are in all management systems.
Mhm.
ISO actually requires that all management systems have the same standard clauses. You can add clauses to those. So we have added some specific ones for 42001.
Yeah.
One of those being that you have to do an AI system impact assessment, which is
Okay.
about how your AI system impacts individuals and societies. But for the most part, they are the same requirements that all management systems have with a specific AI focus. So you have to do organizational risk management, thinking about how the AI systems that your organization uses
Mhm.
factor into that. You have to think about the context of your organization and how AI factors into that.
Yeah.
Then there is an annex full of system level controls that you can use. And those system level controls are kind of the more operational focused, looking more at the systems themselves.
Mhm.
And they talk about things like resource considerations. So the types of resources that you need to run the system. Talks about things like also impact assessments. It talks about the development life cycle. So as if your organization is actually developing the AI systems, not just using an off-the-shelf AI systems, what are the what are all the elements of the development process that you're doing? There are controls around data. What is the data procurement process? What are data protection processes? And so all of those controls can be applicable. They're written at a level that can be applicable to really any type of system. They're meant to be in all management systems. And it's funny because I have people talk to me and complain that, like, well, it's not granular enough and it doesn't tell me exactly what to do and it doesn't, comply with the EU AI Act. Well, one, it's an international standard, so it's supposed to apply internationally. It's not supposed to apply to just one jurisdiction. And two, they are meant to be flexible and scalable enough to really apply horizontally, so that they can be used by different vertical industries, by different types of systems. So, that was a really, really, really long-winded answer to your question. Hopefully answered a lot of other questions
I think
subsequently. But I mean, really, that's the beauty of management systems in general, not just 42001, is that they can be applied if the organization does it in the right way, to any type of system, to multiple types of systems. If you're an organization that is using an age verification system and also, other types of AI systems, you can scope all of those into your management system certification. You just have to do it in the right way, apply the controls consistently, apply the management processes consistently, and then when you get certified, your auditor needs to come in and test all of the appropriate systems.
Thanks a lot for that, Kim. So I think it's really about the applicability and scope of what your system is really doing, and you can look at. Great. And also, when it comes to issues around bias and privacy and compliance, does the standard address those particularly? Because it's a very big issue, obviously, with the concerns about AI. Can you speak more about how that's addressed in the standards?
Yeah, so, like I said, one of the big changes or additions to this standard in the management clauses, so the requirements section, is a requirement to do a system impact assessment, which is about impacts to individuals and societies. We're also doing an SC42 currently at DIS, and we're meeting in South Korea in a couple of weeks and should be going to FDIS out of that. It's ISO 42005. It's guidance on system impact assessments. And what that really goes into is, as you're designing an AI system or implementing or just using, if you're using an off-the-shelf AI system, how to really look at the way that both users, individuals, groups of individuals, as well as society as a whole, can be impacted by that system. So what are the, what are the known uses and the foreseen as well as the unforeseen uses? What are the beneficial impacts? What are the negative impacts? I'm trying to think of some of the other guidance that's in there. It talks about as well the type of data that you use and what types of mitigations have been done on that data to mitigate against unwanted bias. So that's one of the requirements, is to do that impact assessment, which we actually, I always like to brag about this a little bit, but we actually, the group that wrote 42001, put that requirement into the standard before the EU Commission put the requirement for impact assessments into the EU AI Act. So,
Okay. So
It's
we're
because of
first.
you.
I know. So you said it, not me. But I kind of like to think that maybe they were like, oh, that's a good idea. We should do that too. I'm pretty sure that's not how it happened. I think it was more of a, we kind of figured that based on DPIAs in the GDPR, there was probably going to be a similar requirement in the EU AI Act. And it just makes sense, right? Like, we're doing the same thing for privacy. It makes sense to do the same thing for AI and extend it even further. So it's a very similar concept.
Yeah.
I would say extending that even further, to societies as a whole.
Yeah.
In addition to that, like I said, within the system level controls, there are controls that organizations can implement, both, if they're a system developer, or even if they're just using a product, but continuing to train the data. There are controls around how are you governing your data? How are you acquiring your data? Where did it come from? What is the provenance of that data? How are you protecting that data? How are you protecting privacy rights? There's references to the privacy information management system, which we have a session on in working group 5 after this meeting. So there are a number of controls and considerations in the standard. Again, there is nothing in the standard, nor is there anything in any management system standard that says this is exactly how you do it, and if you do it exactly this way, it is going to protect you 1,000%, and it's going to result in a trustworthy, perfect system. I consider management systems as signposts that point an organization in the right direction. And a lot of it is on the organization itself to understand the management system and what it's supposed to do, and to understand their own systems and their own context, and to do the right thing. But if you use it the right way, those guideposts are in there.
And just following on what you said, yes, the standards are there, but just going out of the standards, are there any suggestions that you can provide that help to mitigate this risk? So outside the standards, especially in the context of age assurance, so that we can maintain trust among consumers and regulators when it comes to AI. So not just from the standards perspective, just as businesses that provide this sort of service, use AI technology, are there any things you could recommend that will help to ensure trust in the systems that they're deploying?
Oh, I mean, outside the standards specifically, I would say, like, there's the NIST AI RMF, which isn't exactly a standard. It's a risk management framework that NIST has put out from the US government. There are a lot of resources right now that, as far as there are development tools that will do bias checking and things. I don't have any that I could personally recommend. There are, if you go to kind of trusted resources, like I know for Microsoft at least, our responsible AI, our Office of Responsible AI, which we put out information on what our internal responsible AI practices are, and they have tools and things that we use internally that they recommend. I'm sure Google does the same thing. I know that in the UK they have, in partnership with the government, they have something called the Standards Hub, AI Standards Hub, and it's not just standards, but it's also in partnership with the Alan Turing Institute, and they have a number of resources there to different AI frameworks, tools. There's just a ton of resources that you can access on that site.
And on the 42001, are there any specific provisions in there that directly, will I say, address age verification systems, particularly?
I don't, not that I remember. I believe there are, I think in the implementation guidance of some of the controls, there is language around, groups that have special considerations such as children, or special protections for certain groups like children, particularly in the requirements and controls around like impact assessments, because there are special call outs for sensitive groups
Special
of people and things like that. But as far as I remember, nothing specific that's that talks about age verification specifically.
Yeah, well, because that question is because obviously we're a certification body and we're keen to get the AIMS 42001 also to our clients. And I think one of the challenges we have is trying to narrow it down to exactly how it affects them. A lot of clients are interested in it, obviously, because they deploy the systems, but it's being able to zero it down to exactly how that would affect them. That's why that question, I had asked that question.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, it's a little bit different because this is kind of a system-specific case rather than
generic
an industry.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of industries in general are not struggling with it, but there's a lot of conversations right now about how, what are the exact use cases? How is this modeled? I mean, it was just published in December, and the accreditation standard that accompanies it isn't even published yet, which is very soon, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, there's still lots of, people are figuring it out as they go along. I will stress that, in this standard, along with the other management system standards, there's the concept for the controls that an organization implements. There's the concept of a statement of applicability. So when an organization does their risk assessment and then chooses to implement particular system level controls, you don't have to implement all of the controls. So say you are an organization that is just using a system, and you're not doing any kind of development. You're not even necessarily training any data. You're just using it. That's a lot of controls in 42001 that you can just say, this is not applicable to me. We don't have access to that. What you do have to consider, though, is that there's a section of controls in 42001 for use of AI systems, and so there's still a lot of stuff that you have to do for that. There is also a section of controls on third-party relationships, and that's a big one that I think is going to be, the whole supply chain with AI is going to be complex. But in this scenario, you would want to make sure that your contract with whoever is supplying you that AI system has the type of requirements that you need. And if you are getting 42001 certified, you better make sure that the person who's supplying you the AI system is also getting 42001 certified, because otherwise that's where all the data is coming from. That's where the system development is coming from. And it's not that your certification is meaningless. It still has value because you're doing the right things in your organization, but without that full supply chain, making sure that the full stack of controls is actually implemented, even if not all of them are your responsibility, it's, you know, there's less, I would say, structure and ability to rely on things throughout the supply chain.
Great. So before I proceed, are there any questions you'd like to pose?
I actually had a question. I don't know if I'm actually in the right area to ask this question, but we'll go ahead. So I have recently been made aware that AI finds it difficult to detect features on people of colour. So how would we continue to use AI for age verification, also knowing as well that you have a lot of people of colour who do not look their age, they're much older than what they appear to be and things like that. So how do we get around those issues when coming to deal with, especially in an age verification setting where we need to have an idea of what route we're going to take to be able to fix that issue? Because with AI moving fast, so forward so fast, and more people getting onto the bandwagon, so to speak, how are we going to make it inclusive for everybody to be able to have those kind of to have that digital verification without it causing so much of a problem?
Yeah, and I don't know, so I'm not an age verification
Yeah.
specialist per se, so I might, you know, turn some of that to you. I think, you know, in terms of the data bias question, you know, this is why we have within 42001 and then the impact assessment guidance standard that we're making, there are requirements, and then there is a huge amount of guidance on impact assessments because of this very question. We want people to think about when you're designing your system or when you're implementing a system in your organization that is going to be used by stakeholders, think about these impacts, because these are things that, you know, when systems are trained on a set of data that maybe we don't necessarily have that intention, but it ends up creating this output that, as you said, has an unintended bias. That's a problem that we need to think about. And, you know, this standard is not going to solve all of those problems, but the idea, particularly with the impact assessment, is to really get organizations and, you know, specifically developers to think about, run through the scenarios, like, what is your system doing? What is the purpose of it? What is its intended use? Now that you know its intended use, what could be its unintended use? What are like the bad things that could be used for? And then there's an entire section on data, including, have you thought about all of the potential biases in your data? Have you talked to your stakeholders who are going to use this system about what are the potential impacts of the data that the system was trained on? So I think that this is a problem that is not going to go away for, you know, a while with AI. I think that, you know, no matter our intentions, I mean, I tell this story. I was at a conference in Geneva where we were talking about AI and, you know, bias in data and these very issues, and everyone's very passionate about it, how we need to solve for it. And I looked around the room and I was like, we're all white people. I mean, we all have like these great intentions, but you know, even the people
it doesn't relate to us.
Well, right, and it's like even the people writing the standards who understand the issues and want to make sure that there's no bias. It was like, oh God, like we're perpetuating the issue that we're trying to solve at this like meta level.
Well, I can chime in a little bit on it. So my name is Mark. I'm part of the Age Verification Providers Association. So we represent like a group of 20-something tech providers in the space, and a lot of the companies that we represent are working on various biometric or whatever word is most appropriate in terms of like doing age estimations through facial or any other type of indicator that would represent something without specifically giving away someone's identity. So trying to keep it as anonymous as possible. And when it gets to using AI and having the issues that you're talking about, I think that's mostly just been because kind of early on when they were doing their training sets, they just happened to grab a bunch of like white people to train against. But there's nothing inherent in AI itself that doesn't say, like, if you just wind up using a lot of different faces from across the board spectrum, that it wouldn't work just as well for any skin tone whatsoever. And it's kind of like when you're shift it to another analogy. It's like if all you're looking at trying to train it against dogs, and all you train it against are like big dogs, and then all of a sudden you start showing it little dogs, it's gonna be like, what's that? You know, like, is that a rat or what? You know, because you didn't train it with across the board representations of all types of dogs.
I would just say that if I can just interject that we're one of the technology partners as well, but so I would say any AI system worth its salt should have been through bias testing as part of the accreditation that it goes through, and any good reliable system will have passed all those bias testing. Obviously it depends on the breadth of data that the solution is trained on, and unfortunately part of the problem I think with AI is that getting large enough pools of generic data is really difficult, especially in the age assurance space, where obviously trying to get hold of, you don't just want people who are over 18, you've got to try and get a good set of people who are younger as well. I mean, just to briefly touch on your point about people of colour often being mistaken, they're actually older than they look. Perhaps in the age assurance space that's less of a problem anyway, because apart from it being an inconvenience that you might be asked to verify your age more often than a white person perhaps, the chances of you being mistakenly identified as under the age threshold are at least less. So yes, I can appreciate it might be inconvenient because people will assume you're younger, well, the system will assume you're younger than you are or make you. At least that's kind of the right way around, rather than assessing you older than you really are.
Sure. But I would like to sort of follow up on that. So I'm also one of the vendors, one of the providers, and bias is a very big thing in our sort of core, because we are a global company, so it's something that comes up in conversation all the time. And I would suggest, as you mentioned, if you go back to the NIST sort of evaluations, so in the NIST evaluations, and it will be interesting to see what they will present, I think, tomorrow on Wednesday with age assurance, but when we're looking just at face biometrics, they have specific tests about bias, and it's a very, very big thing, because of course it's not just the color of the skin, but it's also there's a lot of research that white people cannot recognize Asian people and vice versa, because they all look alike. So that's when we're talking about humans, right? Luckily, with AI, it doesn't happen, because we don't or AI doesn't classify, oh, you're Asian, now let me see if you're right. It's just like, okay, you're a person and these are your features, depending, of course, on the solution. I'm really interested to see what NIST will present, because I'm sure that they've tested it. I don't know that they've tested it, but I'm sure that they have, because it is part of their tests when we're looking at face biometrics. Definitely, if you are looking for vendors, have a look there. Yes, it's very complex because there are a lot of tests, but there is specifically on bias as well.
Yeah.
And just to wrap it up, obviously we at HX Certification Scheme, we do inherent bias testing.
Yeah.
So as Mark said, the challenge with that has always been about the data sets, the availability of the data sets. And luckily we have a sizable data set based on what we do as a company. We do test purchasing, where we send 18 to 19-year-olds to go and see if they can purchase age-restricted products. And as part of that, we ask them for their data sets that we use for testing age estimation solutions. So we have that inherent bias testing for both skin tone and gender. And for it, we use something called the Fitzpatrick scale, where it's different shades of skin tone. So we can test it, we can present it to the system, and we'll see how it reacts to it. As he said, it's really about the data set. NIST's data set has been used over and over again. So that's really the issue with it. We are a little bit more confident because we're using fresh data sets that has not been used by most of the systems to train their technology. So that's one way. We understand all the, we try to encourage age estimation solution providers that have gotten their systems certified for age estimation to take a step further to address this issue about skin tone bias and also gender bias, because you see that sometimes some systems will probably not get the age of a female gender rather than the male gender. We also do things, a lot of things that could affect the system, like lighting, glitters. So we've ensured that we have that holistic testing. We call it ambient light analysis testing for how light technology affects it. What's key for us is that it's a functional test. So we're not looking at the AI tech itself. It's purely for the output of what is done. So we're not looking at how the system works. Is we present it, and whatever the output is, basically your claim, if you claim this is how the tech works, is that what it's doing? So it's purely a black box functional test. So we have that service, and hopefully it's something that people that operate in this space will take a good look at, because there's this issue of bias in the marketplace.
And your results, they're public?
Yes, well, so because we're
accredited.
Yes, so we don't benchmark results. We don't say this solution is better than this because we're a certification scheme, but we would publish the results, the reports on our registry, so you can then take your time and go through the certified providers and see whether they meet the thresholds and the metrics that we've used to test and certify them. So it's left for the reliant party or the customer to make their choice.
Are there other, besides skin tone and gender, are there other specific categories?
No, so those are the two key ones for now. Well, that's what I know. Those are the two key ones that have raised a lot of issues in the market space. Skin tone.
Like the only other one I can think of that if you really worked it, you could modify what's going on is like makeup.
I know that there's a technology from Visage that also does about how makeup affects the age estimation. How
That's what I was gonna add to those few things, because there's an array of contributions that can make us seem older, like especially with the youth today, like you said, the makeup, things like that, and the false eyelashes, and they present a lot older than what they genuinely are. You've got 15-year-olds walking around looking like they're 25. So it's those small things that probably could be, but then you have men that wear makeup.
So that's it, and so those are the different issues. They just, it varies, and so I'm not sure you can solve all the problems at the same time, and so we've focused on that, which is the primary issue. And as I said, we do ambient light analysis testing because we also know that in a dark background, AI struggles to verify the age of the person. So we have a full lighting studio where we throw different lightings, simulate real lights, or maybe in a pub or in a supermarket where you could install this. If you're in a club, which is where you likely want to have a system that maybe uses facial recognition to verify age, the flickers, the glares, the strobe lights could throw off the system. So we could test it. But as I said, it's a functional test. It's basically if it does what it says on the tip.
Theoretically, the system should be trained to look past the makeup unless the makeup is absolutely caked on.
An inch high.
Yeah, but in that case, it should return, a negative test
Yes.
and say, no, this person doesn't pass, or it needs
Yeah.
some additional verification. So that should always be the case. If it can't definitively say, I'm 99.99% sure this person is okay, it should throw.
It should say it can't make that decision
but we
rather than
should-
give a decision.
We should also always compare it to what would a person do. So if you would see someone with lots of makeup, would you actually say, oh, she's under 18, or maybe she really likes makeup? What would you do if you would be the gatekeeper?
Well, that's the difference between you and the AI. Like, the AI can't detect those things. I suppose it can, but AI is not as.
It's objective in its analysis.
But that's the
Yeah.
thing. So if we put the makeup aside for 1 second, AI at the moment has better results than humans in detecting stuff. Right? So they have
Significantly better.
better results. So yes, makeup is and actually noted to ask our technical team what do we what are our stats about makeup, because actually yes, we have to look into that. But when we're thinking about it, can they actually fool us as well as humans, or the normative person that doesn't have extensive, let's say, training to see if someone is.
Yeah.
So if we think about it, someone who works at as a bouncer at the club, would they know if someone is underage? Or borderline? Or will they just say, well, you know what, she's hot, she should go in?
Well, through personal experience, I've been out from 16 years of age and been in pubs and bars and clubs and stuff like that. And it was actually ironic that I wasn't asked to present ID until I was 18 and older. But this is 15 plus years ago. I know I don't look exactly.
Last year.
But again, through my own experience, I know that there's many, and for that exact reason, she's a pretty girl. Through working in bars and clubs myself, as well as attending them, I know there are certain things that bars will do, and employees of bars, they will hire the young pretty girls because the young pretty girls bring the men in. And again, same for the clubs and stuff like that. They will let the young pretty girls in because it brings the men in, and therefore that brings the money in. So yeah, it is. There is definitely some kind of. We have to.
So there is bias in the behavior. It's not unconscious. It's actually very, very conscious. In the behavior, and we just need to remember constantly that AI is not perfect, right? First of all, it is as flawed as humans wrote it. But or maybe it is less flawed than the human who wrote it. But we have to understand that there is no bulletproof sort of solution. There is no, and it's just how much harm does it do? So yes, definitely, if someone is turned away from the club, what is the harm? Or if she's asked or he's asked to present an ID, what does it mean? I think it's more problematic here in the UK when a lot of people don't have an ID. for example, and they can't prove that they are now 18 because they didn't get a driving license, and no one will go with
Well, they
the
use a fake
passport.
one, or they use a
Yes.
fake
Yeah.
one. right?
Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
happens an awful lot.
Yes.
I think.
Of course,
Fortunately.
because you have no sort of other way. So how are we as society, as parents, as vendors, how do we actually make sure that everybody, so we're inclusive enough to enable anyone to go to the cloud who is
Yeah.
over 18 without excluding someone who would not want a driving license or whatever. So
Yeah.
how do we do that? And actually, I think Edge Assurance here could give a solution to this problem. Because although I don't have a driving license, I could still show that, or potentially I look over the age that, not now, but then.
Yeah, no.
Right, great. Any more questions?
Should I just check online?
Okay. And I'll just throw this one more to you, Kim. So given the global nature of ISO standards, how can service providers utilize the 42001 to establish credibility and competitiveness in the international market? I'm asking that question purely because I work as a business development manager. And so I'm trying to see how I can swing my pitch to convince them
Is
and
Jonas-
how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few things. I think one, you're going to see, it's really the first certification for AI, for responsible AI that we're seeing.
Yeah.
So I think that you're just going to see naturally a big market pickup
Mhm.
for it. We're seeing a lot of interest, a lot of demand. Certification bodies are getting
Yeah.
lots of questions.
Yeah.
We're getting lots of questions about 142.006, which is the accreditation standard is going to be done.
Yeah.
So I think just in general, there's going to be a lot of market demand for it, and a lot of companies are going to be getting it. I think that, as I mentioned before, in my example with using an AI system and depending on a supplier of an AI
Yeah.
system, that supply chain
Yeah.
is going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
Already supply chains and certifications are important. When you look at cloud computing, if you're using software as a service or infrastructure as a service, there's a lot of reliance on, if you're using infrastructure, making sure that the data center provider has, say, an ISO 27001 certification, to make sure that when you're hosting there, there's a cybersecurity certification related to it. I think that particularly with AI, it's going to be even more complex because, say, in our example before, you're a company and you're using a solution made by a third party. That third party has developed most of it, but they've sourced all the data from another third party. And so we've got this really, it's not even a supply chain, it's kind of a supply web that is really, really complex. And again, you can't get that full picture of customer trust, being able to give your assurance to customers unless you've done your part of that puzzle. And so you might think, well, hey, I don't have a big role in this. I'm only doing the data piece, or I'm only doing this small model training piece. But what you don't realize is that you are a piece in a really big supply chain.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to become more and more evident.
Yeah.
We're starting to see things like models as a service, like services and systems pulling from many models.
Yeah.
And that brings up a lot of questions about certification and reliance.
Yeah.
And so, I think that we're going to see contractually customers requiring
Yeah.
their suppliers and partners to get it, and people who are proactive about that are going to have competitive advantage. That's the pitch that I would
Yeah. Yeah, very good. You should work in sales.
There we go, there's a job there for
Oh my
you.
God, I would hate it.
We want the competitive.
Yes, because I think also just I believe it's something that the market is called network effects. As it begins to grow and people begin to know about it, eventually people begin to request for it. Those that want to incorporate this sort of solutions, either as purely a third party service that they just plug and play, or they actually are developing the AI.
Yeah.
I think that's eventually will drive the market, and you begin to get a lot of companies requesting for at least a certification on AI systems.
Yeah.
So yes, any more questions?
When is the 42006 this thing coming?
So 42006 and 42005 should both be hopefully published by end of summer, early fall this year.
Okay.
And the 4206, that's the accreditation standard.
Yeah,
What's the
so
4205?
essentially 42006 will just allow certification bodies to offer accredited certifications. There are ways that they can still do that now, but it's essentially the
Manual for it.
specific 42001
Yeah.
accreditation.
And what of the 42005? What's that?
So that one is AI system impact assessment.
Okay.
And it's guidance, it's not a requirement or certification standard, but it works in kind of in concert with 42001 to provide more guidance.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We don't have any questions online,
No.
and I think it's been a very informative session, basically letting us know in terms of applicability and scope what the 42001 is still that basically covers. Also having the understanding that from an age assurance perspective, it's not specific on that. We also spoke about the risk management issues around that, and she raised the issue about, which is a very, I'll say, a dominant conversation when it comes to AI technology. There's a lot of concern out there about AI technology, rightfully so, but we also know that it helps to a certain degree. It's basically what is fed into it that it will produce. I think it's the most objective thing, sort of system out there. And so we need to make sure that both in terms of where we apply it, and also just the importance of getting that system checked out through certification to go a long way. So we're really pleased that Kim and her colleagues have put in the effort to author this standard. And hopefully the market will begin to, we'll do our best as a certification scheme for the market to begin to take cognizance of this fact and start to get the system certified. Right, so it's pretty much it.
Yes.
All
I'll
right.
be here all
very
week
much.
if anyone has.
I think you might be busy.
I think you will.
Reach out on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Be popular.
Thank you.
Gentleman's just joined. I don't know if you want to just go and have a chat with him.
Yeah, I'll just ask.